The afternoon sun poured through the windows of the sunny day coffee shop, casting long shadows across the wooden floors. Lily stood wiping down tables, her arms tired after the lunch rush had finally died down. At 23, she wasn't where she had hoped to be in life, but the job paid some bills, though not all of them lately. 20 minutes till closing, called out Mike from behind the counter. Make sure all the tables are clean before you clock out. Lily nodded, moving to the corner table where a group of businessmen had been having a meeting. They'd left behind empty cups, crumpled napkins, and a mess of muffin crumbs. As she gathered the trash, something caught her eye, a small brown leather wallet wedged between the cushion and the armrest of the booth. She picked it up, glancing around the now empty coffee shop. The businessmen were long gone. She should turn it in to Mike, of course, but curiosity made her peek inside first. No ID, no credit cards, nothing that could identify the owner. But what she did see made her breath catch. Cash. A lot of it. Neatly folded bills that looked like they added up to nearly $2,000. Lily's heart pounded. $2,000. Her rent was past due. The electricity company had sent a final notice yesterday. Her old car needed repairs she couldn't afford. That money would solve so many problems. For just a moment, a voice in her head whispered how easy it would be. No ID in a wallet, no way to trace it back. No one would ever know. But that wasn't who she was. That wasn't how Grandma Chen had raised her. "Hey, Mike," she called out, walking to the counter. Someone left this behind. She handed over the wallet, fighting the slight tremble in her fingers. Mike opened it and whistled low. "Wow, that's a lot of cash. Good thing you found it and not someone else." He gave her a small smile that felt like approval, making her stand a little straighter. "I'll put it in the safe. If nobody claims it in a couple weeks, maybe you can have it. That's the rule, right? Finders keepers after a while?" Lily shrugged. "I don't know. Feels like it should go back to whoever lost it. That could be someone's rent, money, or savings." "You're too good, Lily," Mike said, shaking his head as he locked the wallet in the small safe under the counter. "Most people wouldn't think twice about keeping it." Lily returned to her cleaning, trying not to think about how those bills could have changed things for her. Instead, she focused on wiping down the last tables and restocking the napkin holders. By 6 o'clock, she had finished her closing duties. She hung up her apron, grabbed her worn backpack, and headed for the door. The spring evening was mild, with just enough chill to make her zip up her thin jacket. Her apartment was 15 blocks away. A nice walk when the weather was good, and a way to save on bus fare. She was about to step off the curb when she noticed an older woman standing near the coffee shop entrance. The woman was peering into her purse with growing panic, turning it upside down and shaking it. Her hands were trembling, and even from a distance, Lily could see tears forming in her eyes. Something pulled at Lily's heart. The woman reminded her of her grandmother, the same silver-streaked black hair, the same slight build. Before she knew it, Lily had changed direction. "Excuse me," she said gently. "Are you okay? Can I help you with something?" The woman looked up, her face lined with worry. "Oh dear, I don't know what to do. I've lost my wallet. It had everything in it, all my money for the month. I must have left it inside the coffee shop when I stopped for tea earlier." A strange feeling washed over Lily. Could it be the same wallet? The one with no ID but all that cash. "What did your wallet look like?" Lily asked. "Small brown leather," the woman said, wiping at her eyes. "I don't carry cards anymore. Too confusing. Just cash." Lily's heart quickened. It had to be the same one. "I think I might know where it is. I work at the coffee shop. I found a wallet just like that about an hour ago and gave it to my manager. Come with me. We can check if it's yours." The relief on the woman's face was immediate and overwhelming. "Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. That money is all I have until my next pension check." As Lily led the woman back toward the coffee shop door, she had no idea that this simple act of kindness was about to change her life in ways she could never imagine. Lily tapped on the glass door of the coffee shop. Mike looked up from counting the register and frowned, pointing at the closed sign. When he recognized Lily, his expression softened, and he walked over to unlock the door. "Forget something?" he asked, holding the door open just enough to talk through the gap. "No, but I think I found the owner of that wallet." Lily gestured to the older woman standing beside her. She says she left a brown leather wallet here earlier today. Mike looked hesitant. You know the policy, Lily. We're supposed to take their contact information and call them if the description matches, not bring them back after hours. The woman stepped forward, her eyes pleading. Please, young man, that money is everything to me. I can describe exactly what's in the wallet. Mike sighed but opened the door wider. All right, come in, but make it quick. Inside, the coffee shop felt different after closing, quieter, with chairs upturned on tables and the espresso machine silent. Mike led them to the counter and pulled out a form from beneath the register. I'll need you to fill this out first, ma'am. Describe the wallet and its contents. The woman's hands shook slightly as she took the pen. It's small brown leather with a snap closure. Inside there's about $2,000 in cash. No cards, no ID, just the money. Her voice cracked. It's my savings for the next 3 months. I don't trust banks, you see. Mike raised his eyebrows at Lily, who nodded encouragingly. The description matched exactly what she had found. Can I ask why you carry so much cash around? Mike asked, his tone cautious. The woman, who introduced herself as Mrs. Wu, explained that she had withdrawn the money to pay for her grandson's college application fees and some repairs on her small house. I was going to different places today. Didn't want to make multiple trips to the bank. Mike seemed satisfied with her answer. He went to the safe, dialed the combination, and returned with the wallet. Is this it? Mrs. Wu's face lit up. Yes. Oh, thank goodness. She reached for it eagerly. Hold on, Mike said. I need to verify the exact amount first. He counted the money carefully, $1,920 in total. Mrs. Wu nodded vigorously. Yes, that's right. $1,920 exactly. Mike handed over the wallet, and Mrs. Wu clutched it to her chest, tears of relief forming in her eyes. She turned to Lily and clasped her hand. You're an angel. Most young people these days wouldn't have cared about an old woman's troubles. Lily felt warmth spread through her chest. This was why she turned in the wallet, this moment right here. The relief on Mrs. Wu's face was worth more than the money could have been. Anyone would have done the same, Lily said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. Mrs. Wu shook her head. No, dear, not everyone has such a good heart. She opened the wallet and pulled out $200. Please take this as a thank you. Lily's pulse quickened. $200 would cover her electricity bill and leave enough for groceries this week. For a brief moment, she imagined the relief of not having to choose between lights and food. But something didn't feel right about taking the money. That's very kind, but I can't accept it, Lily said, gently pushing the woman's hand away. I was just doing the right thing. Mrs. Wu looked surprised, then impressed. Such integrity, your parents must be very proud. Lily thought about her grandmother, who had raised her after her parents died. My grandma always said that character is what you do when no one is watching. As Mike locked up again, the three of them stepped outside into the early evening air. Mrs. Wu thanked them once more and began walking toward the bus stop. Lily watched her go, feeling a mix of emotions, pride in doing the right thing, a twinge of regret about the money she turned down, and satisfaction in helping someone in need. She was about to head home when a police car pulled up to the curb. 2 officers stepped out, their expressions serious. Excuse me, one of them called out. We need to speak with you. Lily froze, her mind racing. What could the police possibly want with her? Mike stepped forward. Is there a problem, officers? The taller officer nodded gravely. We received a report of theft at this location. He looked directly at Lily. Are you an employee here? Yes, Lily answered, her voice suddenly small. I work here. But there hasn't been any theft. We just returned a lost wallet to that woman. She pointed toward Mrs. Wu, who was now standing at the bus stop about 50 yards away. The officers exchanged glances. Ma'am, we're going to need you to stay right here while we speak with that individual. As one officer approached Mrs. Wu, Lily felt a cold knot form in her stomach. Something wasn't right. The second officer stayed with them, his hand resting casually near his belt. Lily watched as the other officer spoke to Mrs. Wu. To her shock, Mrs. Wu turned and pointed directly at Lily, her expression completely transformed. Lily's heart hammered against her ribs as Mrs. Wu continued pointing at her, her once grateful face now twisted with accusation. The police officer at the bus stop nodded, wrote something in his notepad, and walked back toward them, guiding Mrs. Wu by the elbow. "What's happening?" Lily whispered to Mike, who looked just as confused as she felt. "I don't know," he muttered. "But don't worry, we didn't do anything wrong." The officers brought Mrs. Wu over. Up close, the change in her was startling. The tears and gratitude were gone, replaced by hard eyes and a firm set to her jaw. "This young woman," Mrs. Wu said, her voice now stronger and less shaky, "she stole money from my wallet before returning it." Lily gasped. "What? No, that's not true." The taller officer, whose nameplate read Officer Chen, held up his hand. "Ma'am, please calm down. We're just gathering information." He turned to Mrs. Wu. "You're saying money was missing from your wallet when it was returned to you?" Mrs. Wu nodded firmly. "Yes, there should have been $2,500 in there. But when your employee counted it," she jabbed a finger toward Mike, "there was only $1,920. That's nearly $600 missing." Mike stepped forward. "Officer, that's not possible. The wallet was found by Lily, and she immediately turned it in to me. I locked it in our safe until just now when this woman claimed it." Officer Chen looked between them. "Is there security footage of the coffee shop?" "Yes," Mike said, relief washing over his face. "We have cameras covering the entire main area and behind the counter." The second officer, a shorter man with a buzz cut, spoke up. "We'll need to see that footage. And we'll need statements from all of you." Lily felt dizzy. This couldn't be happening. She had done everything right. Found the wallet, turned it in, even refused a reward. And now she was being accused of theft. "I didn't take any money," she said, her voice trembling. "I found the wallet, saw the cash, and gave it straight to Mike. I never even touched the money." Mrs. Wu scoffed. "Of course you'd say that. Young people these days think they can take whatever they want." The contrast with her earlier praise about Lily's integrity was so stark that Mike gave her a suspicious look. "Ma'am," Officer Chen said to Mrs. Wu, "if you'll come with my partner, he'll take your formal statement. I'd like to speak with these two and review the security footage." As the second officer led Mrs. Wu to the patrol car, Officer Chen turned to Mike. "Can we go back inside to check that footage now?" Mike nodded and unlocked the door once more. The three of them entered the silent coffee shop, the atmosphere now tense with accusation. Mike went straight to the small office in the back where the security system was kept. Officer Chen gestured for Lily to sit at one of the tables. "While he's pulling up the footage, walk me through exactly what happened," he said, taking out his notepad. Lily took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "I was cleaning tables before closing. The shop was almost empty. I found the wallet stuffed in the booth in the corner." She pointed to the spot. "I opened it to see if there was ID, but there wasn't any. Just cash." "And you didn't count it?" Officer Chen asked. "No, I just saw it was a lot and brought it straight to Mike." Her voice cracked. "I could have used that money. My rent is late, and my electricity might get shut off next week. But I would never steal." Something in Officer Chen's expression softened slightly. "Continue." "Mike put it in the safe. Then at closing time, I was leaving when I saw Mrs. Wu outside looking upset. She said she'd lost her wallet with all her money in it. The description matched, so I brought her back to see if it was hers." Mike returned, looking relieved. "Officer, I've got the footage ready. It shows everything exactly as Lily described." They huddled around a small monitor in the office. Mike fast-forwarded to that afternoon, then slowed the footage to normal speed. There was Lily cleaning tables. The camera clearly showed her finding the wallet, opening it briefly, then walking directly to the counter and handing it to Mike, who put it in the safe. "See," Mike said, "she never took anything out of it." Officer Chen nodded thoughtfully. "Let's skip ahead to when you returned the wallet." Mike forwarded the footage. They watched as Mrs. Wu described the wallet. Mike retrieved it from the safe, counted the money in plain view of the camera, and handed it over. The amount he counted aloud in the video matched exactly what he'd given her, $1,920. She claimed it was supposed to be $2,500. Officer Chen asked, rewinding slightly. "Yes," Mike confirmed. "But she never mentioned that amount when she first described the contents. She agreed with my count. Officer Chen rubbed his chin. That's interesting. He turned to Lily. Did you notice anything unusual about her behavior before the police arrived? Lily thought for a moment. She seemed really grateful. She even tried to give me $200 as a reward, but I refused it. She tried to give you money. Officer Chen's eyebrows rose. That doesn't sound like someone who thought she'd been robbed. He studied the footage again, paying close attention to Mrs. Wu's reactions. I need to speak with my partner. Wait here, please. As Officer Chen stepped outside, Lily slumped in her chair. I don't understand why she would lie like that. Mike squeezed her shoulder. The video proves you're innocent. Don't worry. After a few minutes, Officer Chen returned, his expression serious but no longer suspicious. Ms. Wu has a rather interesting history, he said. My partner just ran her ID. This isn't the first time she's made similar claims. Lily blinked in surprise. What do you mean she has a history? Officer Chen sat down across from her, his posture more relaxed now. My partner just informed me that Mrs. Wu has filed 3 similar complaints in the past 6 months, all involving lost wallets, all claiming money was stolen when the wallets were returned. Mike whistled low. So she's done this before? Accused innocent people of stealing? We can't jump to conclusions yet, Officer Chen cautioned, but it certainly raises questions. He turned to Lily. I'm going to need you to come to the station to give a formal statement. You're not under arrest, but we need to document everything properly. Lily's throat went dry. The police station. She'd never been in trouble with the law before. What would Grandma Chen think? Do I need a lawyer? She asked, her voice small. Officer Chen's expression softened. That's your right, but I don't think you have anything to worry about. The video evidence supports your story completely. Mike stepped forward. I'm coming too, as her manager and a witness. 20 minutes later, Lily found herself sitting on a hard plastic chair in a small interview room at the police station. The walls were beige, the lighting harsh. Officer Chen had led her and Mike to the room, asked them to wait, and left with the security footage. What's going to happen now? Lily asked, picking at a loose thread on her sleeve. Mike tried to look confident. They'll take our statements, check the video, and that will be that. You'll be cleared. But Lily wasn't so sure. She'd heard stories about innocent people getting tangled up in the legal system. What if they believed Mrs. Wu over her? After all, she was just a coffee shop worker with past due bills. Who would take her word against an elderly woman's? The door opened, and Officer Chen returned with his partner and a third officer, an older woman with streaks of gray in her dark hair. This is Detective Huang, Officer Chen said. She's going to be taking over this case. Detective Huang nodded at them. Thank you for your cooperation. We've reviewed the security footage and spoken with Mrs. Wu again. Her voice was firm but not unkind. Her story has some inconsistencies we need to address. Hope flickered in Lily's chest. So you don't think I stole anything? The evidence doesn't support her accusation, Detective Huang said carefully. In fact, we have reason to believe there may be a pattern of behavior here that goes beyond today's incident. She opened a folder and laid out 3 police reports on the table. In the past 6 months, Mrs. Wu has reported similar incidents at a bookstore, a pharmacy, and a grocery store in neighboring districts. Each time, she claimed to have lost a wallet containing a specific amount of cash, and each time, when the wallet was recovered and returned, she claimed money was missing. Mike leaned forward. So she's running some kind of scam? Detective Huang's expression remained neutral. We're investigating that possibility. What's interesting is that in each case, the amount she claimed was missing grew larger. First it was $200, then $350, and now nearly $600. Lily's confusion must have shown on her face because Detective Huang explained further. The pattern suggests she may be deliberately leaving her wallet, waiting for an honest person to turn it in, and then claiming more money was originally in it. If the person or business feels pressured by police involvement, they might pay the difference just to avoid trouble. Lily shook her head. That's terrible. She seemed so nice and grateful at first. That's part of the act, Officer Chen added. She gains your sympathy and trust, then turns the tables. What happens now? Mike asked. We need to take your formal statements, Detective Huang said. Then we'll continue our investigation into Mrs. Wu. For the next hour, Lily recounted every detail of her interaction with Mrs. Wu, from finding the wallet to the accusation outside the coffee shop. Detective Huang typed everything into a computer, occasionally asking for clarification. When she finished, Detective Huang printed the statement and had Lily sign it. Mike went through the same process. "Can I go home now?" Lily asked, exhaustion settling into her bones. The adrenaline from earlier had worn off, leaving her drained. "Yes," Detective Huang said. "But we may need to contact you again as the investigation continues." As they prepared to leave, a commotion erupted in the main area of the police station. Raised voices carried down the hallway, one of them unmistakably Mrs. Wu's. "I demand you arrest her. She stole my money. I want to press charges." Detective Huang excused herself and stepped out. Lily and Mike exchanged worried glances. Through the open door, they could see Mrs. Wu gesturing wildly at another officer. Her face was flushed with anger, nothing like the tearful, grateful woman from earlier. "That's her true colors showing," Mike muttered. Detective Huang returned, looking troubled. "Mrs. Wu is insisting we arrest you, Lily. She's changed her story again, now claiming there was $3,000 in the wallet." Lily's stomach dropped. "But the video is clear evidence in your favor," Detective Huang assured her. "We're not arresting you, but there's something else you should know." She hesitated, as if weighing her next words carefully. "We just got a call from another precinct. They've been looking for someone fitting Mrs. Wu's description in connection with a series of similar incidents across the city. But in those cases, when businesses or individuals refused to pay the missing money, strange things started happening to them. Vandalism, online harassment, false complaints to health inspectors." Mike straightened in his chair. "Are you saying she might come after Lily or the coffee shop?" "It's just a possibility we want you to be aware of," Detective Huang said. "We're going to detain Mrs. Wu for questioning tonight, but she'll likely be released pending investigation. I'd advise both of you to be cautious in the coming days." As they finally left the station, the night air felt cool against Lily's flushed face. She hugged her jacket tighter around herself, not just from the chill, but from the sense that her simple act of honesty had somehow led her into dangerous waters. "I'll walk you home," Mike offered, looking concerned. Lily nodded gratefully. As they walked in silence, her mind raced with questions. Who was Mrs. Wu really? How many others had she accused? And most troubling of all, what might she do next? Lily barely slept that night. Every sound outside her tiny apartment made her jump, a car door slamming, voices on the street, even the usual creaks of the old building. By morning, dark circles had formed under her eyes, and her stomach was in knots. She dreaded going to work, wondering if Mrs. Wu would return to the coffee shop, but she needed the money too badly to call in sick. As she approached Sunny Day Coffee, she was relieved to see Mike already inside, setting up for the day. "You okay?" he asked as she tied on her apron. "You look like you didn't sleep." "I didn't," she admitted, kept thinking about everything. Mike nodded sympathetically. "I called the owner last night, told him everything. He's behind you 100%, and he's having me install another security camera outside the shop today, just in case." Lily felt a wave of gratitude. At least her job wasn't in jeopardy. The morning shift passed slowly. Every time the door chimed, Lily tensed, half expecting to see Mrs. Wu's face. By lunchtime, her nerves were frayed, but the busy rush kept her distracted. Around 2 o'clock, when things had quieted down, Detective Huang walked in. She wasn't in uniform, just a simple blazer over jeans, but Lily recognized her immediately. "Got a minute?" she asked, approaching the counter. Lily glanced at Mike, who nodded and motioned for her to take a break. They sat at a corner table, away from the few customers still lingering over late lunches. "We did some more checking on Mrs. Wu," Detective Huang said, keeping her voice low. "Her real name is Rita Zhao. She's been running variations of this scam for years, moving between different neighborhoods and even different cities when people start catching on." Lily's eyes widened. "So she's not even really old?" "Oh, she's in her 60s, Detective Huang said. "But the frailty, the confusion, the tears, it's all an act. She's actually quite sharp and organized." She pulled out her phone and showed Lily a photograph. It was clearly Mrs. Wu or Rita Zhao, but she looked completely different. Her hair was dyed a rich black instead of gray-streaked, her posture straight and confident, her clothes stylish instead of matronly. We found this on her social media. She has several accounts under different names. Lily stared at the photo. I can't believe it. She seems so genuinely upset about losing her wallet. That's why she's been successful for so long. She's convincing. Detective Huang put her phone away. We questioned her for hours last night, but she maintained her story even when confronted with the inconsistencies. We had to release her, but we're building a case. Is she going to come after me? Lily asked, voicing her biggest fear. That's actually why I'm here, Detective Huang said, her expression serious. This morning, she filed a civil complaint against you at the coffee shop, claiming damages of $3,000. What? Lily felt the blood drain from her face. But she can't. It's a nuisance lawsuit, Detective Huang explained. She knows it probably won't succeed, but it can cause trouble and expense. Some of her previous victims paid her off just to make her go away. Tears pricked at the corners of Lily's eyes. I don't have any money. That's the whole reason She stopped, taking a deep breath. What am I supposed to do? You don't have to do anything right now. The coffee shop owner will be served with papers and he'll need to respond. But I wanted to give you a heads up. Detective Huang hesitated. There's something else you should know. We think Rita doesn't work alone. In some of the previous cases, victims reported being approached by someone claiming to be a mediator who offers to help settle the case for a smaller amount of cash, paid immediately. Lily felt like she was drowning in a nightmare that kept getting worse. So if someone approaches me like that, it's part of the scam. Exactly. Don't agree to anything, don't pay anyone. Direct them to the coffee shop's lawyer. After Detective Huang left, Lily went through the motions of her job in a daze. Mike watched her worriedly but didn't press for details. When her shift ended, she was almost at the door when he called her back. The owner wants to see you, he said. He's in the office. Lily's heart sank. Was she about to be fired? Even though Mike had said the owner supported her, maybe the lawsuit had changed his mind. With heavy steps, she walked to the small office in the back. The owner, Mr. Patel, a kind-faced man in his 50s who only came by the shop a few times a month, was sitting behind the desk. Lily, come in, he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His tone was gentle, which made her even more nervous. Bad news often came wrapped in gentle tones. I know about the lawsuit, he said once she'd sat down. Detective Huang called me this morning. I'm so sorry, Lily blurted out. I never meant to cause trouble for the shop. If you need to let me go, I understand. Mr. Patel looked surprised. Let you go? Why would I do that? You did exactly what you should have done. You found a wallet, turned it in, and helped return it to its owner. The fact that the owner turned out to be a con artist isn't your fault. Relief washed over her. So, I'm not fired? Definitely not. Mr. Patel smiled. In fact, I came to tell you that I've hired a lawyer to defend both the shop and you personally. You won't have to pay a penny. Lily's eyes welled with tears. Thank you. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Honest employees are worth protecting. He leaned forward. But there's more. The lawyer thinks we have a strong countersuit case for defamation and harassment, and the police are looking into whether they can build a criminal fraud case by connecting all of Rita Zhao's past scams. A glimmer of hope sparked in Lily's chest. Maybe this nightmare would end with Rita facing consequences instead of her. As if reading her thoughts, Mr. Patel added, Detective Huang also mentioned that after our conversation, she spoke with some of Rita's previous victims. 3 of them have agreed to come forward with their stories. Really? For the first time since the accusation, Lily felt the weight on her shoulders lighten slightly. Yes, apparently your case with the clear security footage and Rita's changing story has given them confidence to speak up. As Lily walked home that evening, her steps were a little lighter. The situation was still scary and uncertain, but she wasn't facing it alone anymore. She was nearly at her apartment building when she noticed a man leaning against the wall near the entrance. He straightened as she approached, his smile too wide, too rehearsed. Lily Chen, he asked, his voice smooth as oil. My name is David. I represent Mrs. Wu in a little misunderstanding that happened yesterday. I think we can clear this up easily without lawyers or courts. Lily's pulse quickened. This must be the mediator Detective Huang had warned her about. Lily's mouth went dry as she faced the man calling himself David. He was dressed in a cheap suit that seemed one size too large, with slicked back hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Everything about him screamed untrustworthy, but Lily forced herself to stay calm, remembering Detective Huang's warnings. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, trying to step around him toward her apartment building's entrance. David smoothly moved to block her path. Come on now, we both know about the little misunderstanding at the coffee shop. Mrs. Wu is very upset, but she's willing to settle everything for just $1,500. That's half of what she's asking for in the lawsuit. A bargain, really. Lily felt a flicker of anger replace her fear. This man and Rita Zhao thought they could intimidate her, squeeze money from her that she didn't even have. My lawyer will be handling all communications about the lawsuit, she said firmly, remembering Mr. Patel's advice. If Mrs. Wu wants to discuss settlement, she can contact him. David's smile faltered. Lawyer? Look, you don't need to get lawyers involved. That'll just make everything more expensive and complicated. Mrs. Wu is being generous here. Generous. Lily couldn't hold back a short, bitter laugh. Falsely accusing me of theft and filing a bogus lawsuit is generous. Watch your tone, David said, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. Things could get much worse for you if you don't cooperate. A chill ran through Lily, but before she could respond, a familiar voice called out from behind her. Is everything okay here, Lily? She turned to see Mike walking towards them, his expression concerned. She'd never been so happy to see someone in her life. This man was just leaving, Lily said loudly, giving David a pointed look. David glanced between them, his confidence visibly wavering with the arrival of a witness. Think about what I said, he muttered before walking away, shoulders hunched. Who was that? Mike asked, watching David's retreating figure. Rita Zhao's mediator, Lily explained, her hands still shaking slightly, just like Detective Huang warned us about. Mike looked alarmed. He approached you at your home? That's crossing a line. We should call Detective Huang right now. Inside Lily's small apartment, they called the detective, who listened carefully to Lily's description of the encounter. That's definitely David Lee, Detective Huang confirmed. He's worked with Rita before. This is actually helpful for our case. It shows a pattern of organized fraud. What should I do if he comes back? Lily asked. Don't engage with him at all. Call us immediately. And Lily, maybe stay somewhere else for a few days just to be safe. After hanging up, Mike insisted Lily pack a bag. You can stay with my sister and her husband. They have a spare room and their building has security. Grateful but embarrassed, Lily quickly gathered some clothes and necessities. As they left her apartment, her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Kim, peeked out her door. Lily, are you okay? That man who was hanging around earlier didn't look right. I'm fine, Mrs. Kim. Just staying with friends for a few days. Mrs. Kim nodded approvingly. Good idea. Oh, and someone else was asking about you earlier too. A woman. She said she was your aunt, but I've never seen her before. Lily and Mike exchanged alarmed glances. What did she look like? Lily asked, though she already suspected the answer. Older lady, very well dressed, black hair with some gray. Seemed very interested in knowing which apartment was yours. Rita Zhao. It had to be. She'd dropped the elderly, confused act and was now actively hunting for Lily. If she comes back, don't tell her anything, Mike urged Mrs. Kim. In fact, call the police. She's involved in a scam. Mrs. Kim's eyes widened. Really? Well, nobody scams people in my building. I'll call my son too. He's a security guard downtown. He can keep an eye out. As they took a taxi to Mike's sister's place, Lily felt overwhelmed. Her simple act of honesty had somehow spiraled into this mess, with her having to flee her own home. I should have just kept that stupid wallet, she muttered. Mike shook his head firmly. Don't say that. You did the right thing. Rita and David are the criminals here, not you. Mike's sister and brother-in-law welcomed Lily warmly, setting her up in their guest room and assuring her she could stay as long as necessary. Their apartment was on the 10th floor of a modern building with a doorman and security cameras, a far cry from Lily's rundown walk-up. That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed, Lily checked her phone before trying to sleep. There was a text from an unknown number. This can still end easily. $1,500 cash tomorrow, or things get worse. With shaking hands, she took a screenshot and forwarded it to Detective Huang, who responded almost immediately. Save everything. Don't reply. We're building the case. The next morning, Mike picked her up to go to work. The owner says you can take some time off if you need it, he told her. Lily shook her head. I need the money, and I'm not going to hide. When they arrived at the coffee shop, Mr. Patel was waiting, talking with a sharp-dressed woman who turned out to be their lawyer. Rita Zhao is well known in legal circles, the lawyer explained after introductions. She's been named in at least 7 similar lawsuits, though most were dropped when people paid her off. Not this time, Mr. Patel said firmly. Mid-morning, Lali was serving a customer when she froze. Through the window, she could see Rita Zhao herself standing across the street watching the coffee shop. Gone was any pretense of being a frail elderly woman. She stood straight, her gaze calculating, wearing an expensive-looking coat and stylish boots. Mike, Lily whispered urgently, nodding toward the window. He looked up and immediately pulled out his phone, presumably to call Detective Huang. But before he could dial, something even more surprising happened. A police car pulled up beside Rita. Detective Huang stepped out, accompanied by another officer. They approached Rita, who initially smiled as if greeting old friends. But her expression quickly changed as Detective Huang began speaking and the other officer took out handcuffs. From inside the coffee shop, they couldn't hear what was being said, but Rita's body language shifted from confident to defensive. She gestured angrily, pointed at the coffee shop, shook her head vehemently. None of it mattered. The handcuffs went on, and Rita was escorted to the waiting police car. Moments later, Detective Huang entered the coffee shop, a satisfied expression on her face. What just happened? Lily asked, hardly daring to hope. Rita Zhao is being arrested for multiple counts of fraud, extortion, and filing false police reports, Detective Huang announced. After you reported David's visit last night, we accelerated our investigation. 3 more victims came forward this morning, and one had evidence that broke the case wide open. What evidence? Mike asked. Detective Huang smiled. One of her previous targets, a bookstore owner, had installed a new security system that included audio recording. He captured Rita admitting the whole scam to David, including how they split the money. She didn't realize it at the time, but that recording has been sitting in police evidence for months. When we connected your case to his, everything fell into place. Lali felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. So it's over? Really over? The criminal case is just beginning, Detective Huang cautioned. But yes, I expect the lawsuit against you will be dropped as part of Rita's plea negotiations. And David Lee was picked up an hour ago trying to leave town. As Detective Huang left, promising to keep them updated, Lily turned to Mike, still in shock. I can't believe it, she whispered. Yesterday I thought my life was ruined, and now? Mike grinned. And now the scammers are the ones in trouble. All because you did the right thing and stuck to your guns. Just then, Mr. Patel emerged from his office, beaming. I just got off the phone with the lawyer. The case against us is being dropped immediately. The coffee shop erupted in cheers from the staff and the few customers who had been following the drama. Someone started a round of applause, and Lily felt her face flush with embarrassment and relief. As the excitement died down, her phone buzzed with a text. It was from Detective Huang. Turn on the local news tonight. Your story is going public, with your permission. Rita and David have been running this scam for years across 3 states. You might have stopped them for good. Lily stared at the message, hardly able to process how much had changed in just 24 hours. From being falsely accused to helping catch career criminals, all because she'd found a wallet and chosen to do the right thing. 2 weeks had passed since Rita Zhao's arrest, and Lily's life had changed in ways she never could have imagined. The local news had picked up the story, interviewing her outside the coffee shop. She'd been nervous in front of the camera, but her simple explanation, "I just did what my grandma taught me was right," had resonated with viewers. The morning after the news segment aired, the line at Sunny Day Coffee stretched out the door and around the corner. People came not just for coffee, but to meet the young woman who'd stood up to the scammers. The tip jar overflowed with bills, many customers adding notes like, "For your honesty" or "For your rent." By the end of that first day, Lily had collected enough in tips to cover her overdue rent and electricity bill with money to spare. When she tried to share the unexpected windfall with Mike and the other staff, they refused. "You earned it," Mike insisted. "Besides, business has never been better. We're all making good tips now." It was true. Mr. Patel had to hire 2 new baristas to handle the increased traffic. He'd also given Lily a raise and promoted her to assistant manager, providing training during the slower afternoon hours. Today, Lily was organizing the supply closet when Mike stuck his head in. "There's someone here to see you," he said, his expression unusually serious. Lily followed him out, wondering if it was another reporter. Several had reached out for follow-up stories, but she declined, most uncomfortable with the attention. Instead, she found an elegantly dressed older woman waiting by the counter. For a heart-stopping moment, Lily thought it was Rita Zhao, somehow free and back for revenge. But as she got closer, she realized this woman was much older, perhaps in her 70s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Lily Chen?" the woman asked, extending her hand. "I'm Helen Wong. I'm a partner at Wong, Davis and Mitchell law firm downtown." Lily shook her hand, confused. "Nice to meet you. How can I help you?" "Actually, I'm here to help you," Helen said with a smile. "May we sit for a moment?" They took a table in the corner, away from the other customers. Helen placed a business card on the table between them. "I've been following your story with great interest," she began, "not just because it made the news, but because my nephew was one of Rita Zhao's earlier victims. He owns a small bookstore on the east side." "The one with the audio recording?" Lily asked, remembering what Detective Huang had said. Helen nodded. "Exactly. When they connected his case with yours, it finally brought Rita's operation down." She paused, studying Lily carefully. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because people with your kind of integrity are rare." Lily shifted uncomfortably. "I didn't do anything special. Anyone would have turned in the wallet." "Would they?" Helen raised an eyebrow. "And would anyone have stood their ground when threatened and intimidated? Detective Huang told me you never wavered, even when it would have been easier to pay Rita off or just quit your job to escape the situation." Before Lily could respond, Helen continued, "Our firm has a scholarship program for promising young people interested in pursuing a legal education. We pay full tuition plus a living stipend." Lily blinked, not understanding. "That's very generous, but—" "I'd like to offer you a spot in the program," Helen said directly, "and a part-time position at our firm while you attend school." Lily felt like the floor had dropped out from under her. "But I'm not even in college yet. I've been saving up, but—" "The scholarship covers undergraduate studies as well, for students committing to law school afterward." Helen's expression softened. "Detective Huang mentioned you've been taking night classes at the community college whenever you can afford them. She also said you originally wanted to be a lawyer, but had to put those dreams on hold to support yourself." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes. She had confided that to Detective Huang during one of their conversations, never expecting anything to come of it. After her grandmother died 3 years ago, Lily had been forced to drop out of college to pay the bills, her dreams of law school fading with each passing month. "Why me?" she managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. "Because the law needs people with your moral compass," Helen said simply. "People who do the right thing even when it's difficult. People who stand up for truth even when threatened." She slid a folder across the table. "All the details are in here. Think about it. Talk it over with people you trust. But know that this offer is genuine and it comes with no strings attached." After Helen left, Lily sat staring at the folder, unable to quite believe what had just happened. Mike came over and sat across from her. "What was that about?" he asked. Wordlessly, Lily pushed the folder toward him. He read through the documents, his eyes widening. "Lily, this is incredible. Full scholarship, living expenses, guaranteed part-time work. This is everything you've talked about." She nodded, still processing. It doesn't seem real. 2 weeks ago, I was worried about keeping the lights on. Now this? You deserve it, Mike said firmly. And you'll make an amazing lawyer someday. Later that evening, Lily sat on the balcony of Mike's sister's apartment, where she was still staying until she could find a safer place of her own. The city lights sparkled below as the sun set, casting everything in a golden glow. Her phone buzzed with a text from Detective Huang. Good news. Rita and David both accepted plea deals. Multiple charges, significant jail time. You won't have to testify. Relief washed over her. She wouldn't have to face them in court, wouldn't have to relive those frightening days. Another text followed. Also, heard about the scholarship offer. Helen Wong is the real deal. Her firm does a lot of work helping victims of fraud and other crimes. You'd fit right in. Lily smiled, typing back a thank you. Then she opened her phone's photo gallery, scrolling to a picture of her grandmother, the woman who had raised her with the unshakable belief that honesty and integrity mattered above all else. I wish you could see this, Grandma, she whispered. You always said doing the right thing would lead to good in the end. The next morning, Lily arrived at the coffee shop early, before her shift. Mr. Patel was already there, reviewing the books. Aunt Lily, he said warmly. Just the person I wanted to see. I've been thinking about creating a new position. A manager for the second location I'm planning to open next month. Lily smiled but shook her head. That's really generous, Mr. Patel, but I think my path is changing. She told him about the scholarship offer. Instead of being disappointed, he beamed with pride. That's wonderful news. Of course you must accept, though we'll miss you terribly here. I'd like to keep working part-time until school starts, if that's okay, Lily said, and maybe weekends after that. This place and everyone here. You all stood by me when things were bad. I won't forget that. Mr. Patel nodded, understanding. This will always be a home for you, Lily. And perhaps someday, when you're a successful lawyer, you'll remember the little coffee shop where it all started. As customers began to arrive, Lily tied on her apron one more time. The familiar routine felt different now, tinged with the knowledge that it was temporary. Soon she would be starting a new chapter, one she had thought closed forever. A young man approached the counter, ordering a simple coffee. As Lily handed him his change, he dropped a $5 bill in the tip jar. You're the one from the news, right? He asked. The honest barista who caught those scammers. Lily nodded, embarrassed by the recognition. That was really brave, he said. My grandma got taken by a scam like that last year. Lost her savings. Nobody ever got caught. He smiled sadly. Anyway, thanks for what you did. Makes me think maybe there's still good people out there. As he walked away, Lily felt a warmth spread through her chest. Her simple decision, finding a wallet and doing the right thing, had created ripples she never could have foreseen. It had brought justice not just for her, but for others who had been victimized. It had reopened doors she thought permanently closed. And perhaps most importantly, it had reminded her of who she really was and who she wanted to be. Outside the coffee shop window, the morning sun cast long, golden rays across the sidewalk. A new day. A new beginning. All because she had chosen kindness and refused to compromise, even when doing so would have been easier. Sometimes the simplest choices are the ones that change everything.